often do you think about the Roman Empire? I think about it daily. I mean, there's so much to think about. A settlement made entirely of criminals and outcasts that grew into a giant empire? They weren't artists or philosophers, their pantheon was adapted from Greeks. So, how did this Roman Empire even happen? In this video, we will go through several important Roman inventions in politics and warfare, and how they propelled Romans forward. If you want to know more, and in great detail, I highly recommend a podcast, History of Rome. One of the most important people involved in the creation of Rome was Alexander the Great, or more accurately, one of the most important people not involved. Many speculate that the Roman Empire wouldn't exist if Alexander would go west instead of east, but he's a topic of another video. Leave a comment if you want to know more. The first step was creating laws. Sounds boring and basic for a modern person, but not back there. Before the Roman Empire, the Italian peninsula was filled with various city-states with different laws and customs, and the Roman Empire changed it all. As I've mentioned before, Romans were outcasts and criminals, warriors first and everything else later. Religion and law were two things that helped to govern them and turn them into the titans of civilizations later. The basis of all modern constitutions is based on Roman laws, although maybe unsurprisingly, most of Roman laws were focused on property laws. Acts of violence were much more accepted back then. Of course, laws favored patricians and not plebes. All of this divided Rome, except at the time of war, when all Romans focused on their enemies and not each other. And law was not only a basis of life in Rome, but a cornerstone of Roman disciplines and tactics. Before anything else, Romans were famous for being incredibly disciplined. Even if they were losing, they were unafraid and calm. Many of their enemies were scared of groups of soldiers retreating in a calm, organized manner. And then, even scarier, Romans had war camps. Imagine being one of the many city-states Romans conquered. Romans are in your territories, where they're supposed to be vulnerable, and they build an entire war camp overnight. A war camp that provided them defense, rest, and even better organization. You see, war camps were standardized. Each one was the same as the other, and followed very precise instructions. You start to see a pattern? Fascination with the Roman Empire comes from their incredible discipline and organization that changed the world drastically. What else have they revolutionized? Roads. Roman roads won so many wars for them. This improved everything: trade, war logistics, and simple commute. Romans could respond to threats incredibly fast, and they rarely run out of food in distant provinces. And of course, there was a standardized design that every road was built with. These roads were an absolute marvel of engineering. It required surveying the terrain, finding the most optimal routes, and because they were standardized, they required a lot of transportation and endless manpower. It also required leveling the ground and creating drainage to keep roads dry and safe. If that doesn't sound impressive, remember roads in your place of living, and tell me if the current government could effectively build roads all over the country. If you want to experience a Roman road, check out the Appian Way. Before we move on to the most impressive Roman invention that gave them an upper hand in every battle, I want to mention an important aspect of Roman law that made their decision-making so impressive: dictators. The current meaning of the word is far from its initial meaning. Usually, the council was run by two annually elected councils. But if things would go south, very, very south, Rome would appoint a dictator, a person with absolute power who can do whatever they want for 6 months. If someone wouldn't relinquish their powers after, consequences were grim. Dictators had to resolve the crisis quickly and decisively. He was a panic button and was expected to do drastic measures. One of the most famous dictators was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who was appointed twice and was a big influence in turning the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. And he also paved the way to the most famous dictator, Julius Caesar. His notable decision was not to relinquish his dictatorship. Julius Caesar was in power just in 3 years, but he changed the Roman Empire so much he's the most important Roman to this day. But this is a topic for another video. Now, let's talk about tactics and formations. Everyone who thinks of Romans thinks about the famous phalanx. But in reality, the most famous Roman formation was invented to beat the phalanx. Phalanx was actually a Greek invention, although its variations were often used in the Mediterranean. Of course, Romans took it as many other things. Remember, Romans were effective, not nice. So let's talk about the phalanx. Let's really talk about it. It was a dominant strategy for a long time and famously consisted of a tight formation of soldiers with long spears and a wall of shields, creating an effective balance of offense and defense. And another important aspect of it was rows. You could easily replace the first row if they are tired or other things. As I said earlier, it comfortably dominated everything for hundreds of years. And then, Romans invented maniple. How did it counter the phalanx? Well, maniple wasn't designed specifically for phalanx. Instead, it was devised during the Second Samnite War. Phalanx formation simply didn't work. Such tight formation requires flat terrain, and Samnium wasn't. It was rugged. Mountains, hills, forest. Samnites were smart about it too. They were experienced in guerrilla warfare, ambushes at choke points, hit and runs, and many more. After countless losses, they finally created maniple, which is also described as a phalanx with joints. It consisted of 4 lines, 120 soldiers in general. First row were velites, extremely mobile and extremely poor troops. Their role was hit and run, scouting, and harassment of enemy troops. Their equipment was quite light because, again, they consisted of the poorest and least experienced Romans. First line of heavy infantry were hastati, young and inexperienced soldiers who usually began the fight. Second line was principes, more experienced soldiers. Then triarii, the veterans. This formation allowed Romans to have choices and keep their best soldiers rested until they were needed, allowing their youngest to retreat to safety and fight tired opponents with their best at their best. Adding cavalry, usually nobles, to that made it even better. They helped with scouting, protected flanks of the maniple, and attacked flanks of their enemy. This, along with many other things, helped Rome emerge victorious. So, maneuverability and personal initiative allowed Romans using maniple to dominate even more and smash any opposition, especially phalanxes. Later, it was replaced by cohorts with 480 soldiers instead of 120, and is probably most often used in media to depict Romans. It was organized in 10 cohorts, first one double the size of the rest. If maniple was long, each cohort was much more compact, and yes, even more versatile. Now they could easily change their tactics on the fly, depending who they were facing against. Every cohort was like one unit and could work independently or together with other cohorts. But let's walk away from warfare for a bit and concentrate on concrete. Yeah, concrete. We all know famous Roman aqueducts and baths, but none of it would exist without what Romans did to concrete. Of course, it existed before them, but Romans improved it significantly, continuing the pattern of taking good things and making them great. One of the most important things about Roman concrete was its ability to harden underwater, which is perfect for bridges and aqueducts. This remarkable property was achieved by using through the addition of pozzolana, a volcanic ash or silica-ish material which reacted with lime to create a durable binding agent. I wonder if they found these properties by accident, like superglue. If you want to know more, watch our accidental inventions video. Without this, aqueducts wouldn't exist, and they are a marvel by themselves, an intricate system that allowed Romans to transport water for dozens, even hundreds of kilometers. The amount of work and planning it needed was absolutely staggering. Of course, such technology also made Rome progress rapidly. Having a privilege of always having water for drinking and even bathing simplified life for Romans and allowed them to prosper. The last one wouldn't be a surprise based on names for Romans, but of course they laid the foundation for the modern calendar. Initial Roman calendar had only 304 days in it, and Julius Caesar wanted to change it because it brought serious drawbacks. And then, of course, they based the new one on the solar year. Again, it sounds small, but it greatly improved administration, trade, and communication in the giant empire. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this.